From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro has addressed his supporters and urged them to sign a document to promote peace. The letter condemning U.S. intervention attempts will be given to the U.S. government. In the document, Venezuelans call for their right to independence, sovereignty, and self-determination. Thousands have already signed on, while millions more are expected to do so throughout the country.
Acabo de firmar en apoyo.
I have just signed a letter to support the right of independence and sovereignty of the Venezuelan people. I have just signed it and told the imperialist forces, hands off Venezuela. Venezuela deserves respect. We're going to send this to the U.S. in the name of all Venezuelans, thinking about the future of our country and always aiming for peace in our country.
We move to Uruguay now, where, speaking exclusively for teleSUR, the Bolivian foreign minister has stood in support of the resolution reached by the mechanism of Montevideo Group on Wednesday. He also criticized the interventionist resolution made by the EU-backed contact group earlier on Thursday.
Here in Uruguay, two proposals were made in regards to the situation in Venezuela. One by the mechanism of Montevideo, made up by Mexico, Uruguay and CARICOM nations, and which Bolivia has adhered to as well, calling for an open dialogue to resolve the situation in Venezuela. The other proposal, promoted by the European Union, can be supported by Bolivia. The reason is because we can't support a proposal for elections in Venezuela. That is something that only Venezuelans must decide. That is an internal affair, and Venezuelans are the ones who must resolve this political situation.
The minister also referred to Bolivia's stance on the EU wanting to send humanitarian aid to Venezuela.
There needs to be coherent action by all of countries that are taking part in this meeting. We need to work in order to help Venezuela. We can't talk about humanitarian aid, on the other hand, support the financial blockade against Venezuela. We urge all countries to stop the blockade against Venezuela so that we can discuss any type of humanitarian aid. We are sure that the economic and financial blockade against Venezuela is what is hurting the political situation in the country.
The EU-backed contact group, who met on Thursday in Uruguay to discuss the situation in Venezuela, concluded that their goal is for elections to be held in Venezuela and for humanitarian aid to be allowed in the country.
The group, through the co-chairs of the meeting, that is the two of us, will proceed with the necessary contacts with relevant Venezuelan actors, as well as with regional and international partners, with the aim of, first, establish the necessary guarantees for a credible electoral process within the earliest time frame possible, and second, enable the urgent delivery of assistance in accordance with international humanitarian principles. To implement these goals, the International Contact Group will send a technical mission to the country. The group will reconvene at ministerial level by the beginning of March to take stock of progress. And in between, we will have a senior officials meeting in the next couple of weeks.
And as the international summit on the political situation in Venezuela was underway, demonstrators in Montevideo rallied in support of the Venezuelan government. Protesters also came out against the EU-backed International Contact Group. They called for the non-intervention of external forces in the domestic affairs of Venezuela.
We believe this is an imperialist stance both from the United States and European countries aimed at seizing Venezuela's natural resources, while ignoring the fact that the Venezuelan people have supported Chavismo for more than 20 years now. We think that should be respected, and that Venezuelans should decide their own fate, not people from abroad who have their interests that do not align with the well-being of the Venezuelan people.
President Maduro took to Twitter to salute the meeting of the Montevideo mechanism and said, "We subscribed to the four-phase proposal for dialogue in Venezuela." He also said that the country is ready to participate in an open agenda of understanding for peace. And the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, in his role as CARICOM chairman, has also urged all nations to support a peaceful approach regarding the political situation in Venezuela. The CARICOM chairman says the Caribbean region would also be impacted should there be a military intervention. The government of the United States and Colombia are trying to provide what they call humanitarian aid to the people of Venezuela. But many worry this is nothing but a trap for the Venezuelan government that will increase international pressure against the Maduro administration. Let's find out more in this report.
The Las Tienditas International Bridge in the city of Cúcuta borders Venezuela. It has been chosen as the drop-off point for the so-called humanitarian aid that the US and Colombia want to deliver to Venezuela. Neither the International Committee of the Red Cross nor the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is involved with this initiative, and far less the legitimate president of Venezuela.
What must be made clear is that the aid being offered and what could be delivered cannot be used as a tool to pressure the Venezuelan government, and it can't be given to just specific groups within the population.
The Colombian government's refusal to hold an open dialogue with the Venezuelan government has further damaged an already fractured relationship between the two nations.
We have asked for increased police and military presence, but it's not that we are preparing for battle. It is simply done to keep citizens safe, as well as Venezuelan migrants.
Distorting international humanitarian law, member nations of the so-called Lima Group and their supporters have turned down any offer to hold talks with President Nicolás Maduro. It appears their goals are more political and less humanitarian.
This is a complex topic, and we must focus on the different scenarios. Is there an armed conflict underway in Venezuela? There isn't one. Therefore, we can't really appeal to the rules of international humanitarian law, because these rules are to be applied in times of armed conflicts.
Despite the barrage of fake news and misinformation, Colombians and Venezuelans continue moving through the border. And while there are political differences, they ask that the situation not escalate into armed conflict.
There are many innocent people living here. Politicians need to fix their own problems without a war. There must be a dialogue.
Where will the bombs land? They're gonna send troops without any compassion.
Many have called on the Lima Group to demand that the United States lift the economic blockade against Venezuela.
Thousands of Venezuelan citizens have rallied in the state of Guarico to show their support for the government of President Nicolás Maduro. The president of the National Constituent Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, joined the supporters. Demonstrators highlighted they came to support the Bolivian revolution and stand against interventionist attacks by the United States government.
Imperialism wants to bring in humanitarian aid, but they have blocked us from buying food and medicine for our people. They cannot be more cynical. We do not need charity from anyone. We demand to the world to respect Venezuelan people.
And earlier on Thursday, the Venezuelan Minister of Communications outlined evidence of an attempted coup against President Nicolás Maduro. Jorge Rodriguez says it included the participation of the United States and other governments, including Colombia. He says a Venezuelan intelligence operation led to the arrest of retired Colonel Osvaldo Valentín García Palomo, who wanted to enter the country to overthrow Maduro's government.
And considering the severity of the confessions and the testimonies that he is providing, we request, on grounds of national security, that he is mentioning the plans to stage a military coup against the constitutional government of Venezuela. And he is also mentioning elements of aggression against the constitutional president. García Palomo mentions and also confesses that these North American officers expressed that in the first trimester of 2019 there was a military operation that was planned against Venezuela. So you can forget about all the humanitarian aid claims. All of that is a lie. It is very clear that the real intent from the Trump administration and John Bolton and Marco Rubio and Mike Pence is military aggression against Venezuela. So in an exercise of macabre and terrifying nationalism, Garcia Palomo said, no, we don't need Americans to kill each other. We can kill ourselves. We can do that. And then is when we managed to capture this man.
Protesters in London gathered outside the Bank of England to demand that it return Venezuela's funds. The Bank of England is reportedly holding on to $1.2 billion worth of gold that belongs to the Venezuelan people, and now it is refusing to give it back following the UK's recognition of the self-proclaimed President Juan Guaidó. Labour Party politician Chris Williamson was among those at the protest.
The British government's whole position is simply acting as Donald Trump's poodle, cannot be allowed to stand without opposition.
In Miami, Florida, protesters took to the streets to demonstrate against the Venezuelan opposition and to denounce U.S. intervention in the country. They held signs denouncing the media coverage by Spanish-language channel Univision, which has been accused of biased coverage in favor of the Venezuelan opposition.
The United States historically has gone from country to country to country, imposing its policies, imposing its rule. And people in Venezuela stand up to this, people in Nicaragua have stood up to this, and so it's very important to defend the people in Venezuela who want to do that.
And the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa has called for an end to the attempts to unseat the legitimate government of Venezuela. In a press statement, NUMSA said the actions by the United States and other countries are an attempt to plunder Venezuela's natural resources and reverse the progress made by the Bolivarian Revolution to improve the life of working-class Venezuelans. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Just days after presidential elections were held in El Salvador, the leaders of the country's two main parties have announced a change in their leadership.
The FMLN's Political Commission has said they accept the results of the February 3rd elections. They also announced that they are going to change their strategies and methods to confront a new political reality.
We need to make changes in our leadership in order to continue being a left-wing party that is capable of fighting alongside our people to create a society with social justice, equality, and freedom.
The left-wing party also said that internal elections will be preponed so they can be carried out during the first 6 months of 2019. The party has lost almost 75% of voters' support when compared to the presidential elections that took place 5 years ago.
Today we must promote the participation of young generations. They are revolutionary and ethical people who will be able to carry the FMLN forward.
The election results were not good for the Arena Party either. Even with an alliance with another 3 parties, they could not force a second round.
As always, when there is a victory, there are a lot of dads. But when there is a loss, there are a lot of orphans. In loss, there is a lot of finger pointing. Sometimes those fingers belong to people who did nothing when it was time for working hard.
The next elections to choose lawmakers and mayors will take place in 2021. So the FMLN said it is urgent to restructure their internal organization.
At least 6 people have been killed in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil due to heavy rains and flooding. The victims died after a bus was hit by a landslide. Damages were particularly strong in the southern part of the city, which flooded roads and fallen trees. Local authorities have called for a state of emergency in the city.
This was a preventable tragedy, because authorities could have taken more precautions, since heavy rains were already expected. They should have done some precautionary work, such as checking which trees were more prone to falling down, to do the necessary pruning, to unclog manholes, which hasn't happened. People should also be more aware and not throw garbage on the streets, because that also causes a lot of these problems.
People from communities located near the Ituango Dam in Colombia have condemned the destruction of the river that was their source of sustenance. Our correspondent in Colombia, Tatiana Portela, has the details.
People living in communities near the Cauca River, where the Ituango Dam is located, have said the river is completely gone. They say the river is dead and no one from the government of President Iván Duque has said or done anything about it. Before the disasters, the communities already reported the death of fish and the overall deterioration of the river. Now, fishing communities do not have a way to sustain their families and have been left without work. Electricity and water company EMP said they have to wait to release water accumulated in the dam. But communities answered that the river is already damaged. The flora and fauna are already gone. We have to remember that for 8 months, people from many communities have been living in shelters due to a fissure in the Ituango Dam. The Antioquia governor will arrive in the municipalities affected to evaluate the situation. Communities ask for the Ituango Dam to be completely closed down.
Thank you, Tatiana, for that report. Hundreds of potential voters in Guyana braved harsh weather conditions to protest against the country's elections commission. They demand the commission hold elections within the constitutionally stipulated timeline. Protesters were accompanied by People's Progressive Party General Secretary Bharat Jagdeo and the party's presidential candidate. Police set up barricades and blocked off all the cross streets in anticipation of protests earlier this week.
Protect the Constitution. She can do. What must she can do? You must respect the Constitution. You must respect the Constitution. What do you want? Election. 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 What must she can do? Election. What must she can do? Election.
A huge explosion killed at least 6 people on Tuesday in the Gloria coal mine in Middelburg, east of the capital in South Africa. Rescue teams are still trying to reach the remaining 22 people, but their chances of survival are slim. Our correspondent Matuba has the details.
We are here at the Gloria coal mine in South Africa's Mpumalanga province, and we understand that down this shaft here behind me, 6 people of the 22 that are known to have been down when the explosion happened on Tuesday, only 6 of them have been brought to the surface, and those are lifeless bodies. So it means 6 people have died, and there's more to look for. And the hope of finding anybody alive from that Tuesday explosion is dwindling every single hour. In fact, the mine spokesperson who just spoke to us just now says there is no hope that there will be anybody found alive down the shaft. And he has also explained that none of the people down there are miners or employed by the mine. These are the people who he called cable thieves. These are people, because this mine has not been operational since November. In fact, there are people who are employed by this mine who are here, who have not been paid and have not been receiving their salaries, but have been coming here to find out what's going on. But now the people who we know that are down there and probably have died are not employed by the mine, but the people who are trying to get their hands on the cable to sell it. And not far from this mine where we are now, there is some sort of a settlement, an informal settlement where people live, and it's alleged that most of the people who are down there, the people that are trying to get to the surface, are not even South African. They are foreign nationals. Some of them, most of them, according to people who have seen them, are from Lesotho. And we also have heard from their friends who wanted to go down to rescue their friends. That's what they've been telling us. But so far, 22, the official statistics is 22 people are down there, and it's very unlikely that they'll be found alive, according to the spokesperson, who says it's been since Tuesday and there was a massive gas explosion down there, and they've actually halted the operations to find the rescue operations to find any bodies down there. So because it's quite dangerous, according to what Mr. Elliott said earlier on. It's back to you.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Rescue workers have pulled a 5-year-old girl alive from the rubble of a collapsed residential building in Istanbul. At least 2 people were killed and 4 more were injured when the building came down yesterday. Rescue teams have already reportedly saved at least 6 people, but they are continuing to search for several others believed to be trapped. Authorities are investigating the cause of the collapse. 4 United States Congresswomen have called on the government to cut funding for President Donald Trump's deportation task force, ICE, and also called for the protection of migrants.
This is one of the most urgent moral issues and crises that we have in America right now. Not only will we not agree to fund that, but we're here to say that an agency like ICE, which repeatedly and systematically violates human rights, does not deserve a dime.
This Thursday, a U.S. jury entered its 4th day of deliberation in the El Chapo trial. The Mexican drug lord could face a life imprisonment if convicted. On Wednesday, the jurors had asked to review lengthy transcripts of testimony of 3 cooperating drug dealers who testified against Guzman. Deliberations began after 3 months of testimony.
Siempre en presencia de su defensor.
And now it's time to bring you more stories from around the world.
France has recalled its ambassador to Rome after accusing Italy of repeated and baseless attacks against France. Tensions between the 2 traditional allies have not been so hostile since the end of World War II. The move comes after the Italian Deputy Prime Minister, Luigi Di Maio, met with Yellow Vest protesters near Paris earlier this week. Turkey has slammed France after President Emmanuel Macron announced that they would turn April 24th into the National Day for Armenian Genocide. Turkey and Armenia have long been at odds over the treatment of Armenians during World War I, in which around 1.5 million people were killed, according to Armenia. But Turkey, the Ottoman Empire's successor, denies the deaths amounted to genocide.
This French decision, more precisely the decision of Macron, targets the Republic of Turkey directly. Behind this decision, there is a clear will to make Turkey a genocidal state. So that decision targets us and aims at breaking our national unity. This is why we are very angry.
According to a classified document released by Reporters Without Borders, the Iranian government arrested, imprisoned and executed at least 860 journalists during the Islamic Revolution between 1979 and 2009. The organization said it obtained an official register from Iranian judicial authorities. They released the report in a conference in Paris, coinciding with the 40th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution that brought Ayatollah Khomeini to power.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.